But let me say good morning to each and every one of you. Welcome to the Atlanta Council on International Relations webinar on cyber and the coming revolution, coming remote work revolution. We'll see what happens with that. Again, we at ACIR hope each and every one of you and your families and your friends are healthy, well, and safe during this very, very difficult COVID-19 time. If this is your first time to engage in an ACIR program, the Atlanta Council on International Relations is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that attempts to promote understanding through the free exchange of ideas on many of the complex problems that confront the United States and other nations in the world today. You can visit our website at www.atlantacir.org for details on upcoming events, recent newsworthy articles, and articles by our consul generals, as well as membership opportunities and benefits. So again, thanks for joining us today. For those of you who are members, thanks for joining us. But I have to say, ladies and gentlemen, that this sure doesn't substitute well for our breakfast and luncheon meetings where we have an opportunity to meet and interchange ideas and reestablish old friendships. These webinars simply aren't the same. If you visit the ACIR website, you will note some of our upcoming events. On October 26th and 27th, ACIR will co-sponsor the Georgia Tech Center, along with the Georgia Tech Center for International Business Research and Education, a webinar for their 11th USA-India Business Summit and the 26th Georgia Tech Global Business Forum. On October 29th, ACIR will host a webinar with Bruce Sagarius on coping with worldwide white-collar crime threats. On the 18th of November, we will host a webinar on human trafficking, an enormous problem around the country, but a particular problem here in Atlanta with the largest airport in the world. On December 8th, ACIR members will have an opportunity to hear and interact with James Story, Chargé d'Affaires for the Venezuelan Affairs Unit located at the United States Embassy in Bogota, Colombia. I would like to take this opportunity to mention that ACIR has two new members on its team, Shilpi Ganguly, who has joined as our Director of Information Technology, and Almaz Samiri, who joins as Director of Human Resources. In normal times, we would have an opportunity to meet these people in person. These simply aren't normal times. I also would like to welcome members of Atlanta's Diplomatic Corps, alphabetically by country, Jorge Lopez Minardi, Consul General of Argentina, Connie van Wulpen, Director of the Flanders Investment and Trade Office of Belgium. Welcome, Connie. We haven't had a chance to meet. I look forward to meeting you soon. Aldo Alper, Honorary Consul General of Estonia. And last but certainly not least, Dr. Swati Kulkarni, Consul General of India. I sure hope I didn't miss anyone. I'd also like to thank our institutional members, the Georgia Institute of Technology and the University of North Georgia, as well as our strategic partners, the Sam Nunn School of International Affairs at Georgia Tech, Global Atlanta, and Stratfor for their continued support for ACIR. Today, of course, it is our special pleasure to welcome our speaker, Thomas Finan, cyber growth leader with Willis Towers Watson's financial, executive, and professional risk effort. And now I'd like to turn it over to our Vice President and Executive Director, Colin Brady, to introduce the speaker.
Good morning. Welcome, Mr. Finan. Tom is a graduate of the University of Virginia and the University of Minnesota Law School. He is a former Assistant General Counsel at the FBI. He served as the staff director and counsel for the Subcommittee on Intelligence Information Sharing and Terrorism Risk Assessment with the U.S. House Committee on Homeland Security. He then served with the Department of Homeland Security's National Protection and Programs Directorate as Senior Cybersecurity Strategist and Counsel. Before joining Willis Towers Watson's FINEX Cyber E&O practice, where he advises the company's integrated approach to cybersecurity across all aspects of people, capital, and technology risk, Tom worked as the Chief Strategist Officer of ARC Network Securities. Let's welcome Tom Finan with a virtual round of applause. Tom.
Thank you so much, Colin. And I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. And thank you everyone for joining today. As you heard at the beginning, today we're going to be talking about, after COVID, the coming remote work revolution. As Colin and others said, I'm Tom Finan with Willis Towers Watson. I'd like to thank the Atlantic Council on International Relations very much for hosting me today and to be giving me the opportunity to share some thoughts with you. It's both a privilege and an honor. So let's get to it. When America and the world finally emerges from the COVID-19 pandemic, cybersecurity will never be the same. And the reason is people. While companies typically reserve work from home privileges for standout employees, they soon will find themselves in a world where those arrangements have become the expected employee norm. And cybercriminals are adjusting their tactics accordingly. Hackers already are shifting their targets from relatively well-defended corporate environments to home offices and other off-site locations that lack strong protections. And the recent surge in phishing attacks aimed at quarantined remote workers is just one sign of this impending change. In a recent survey, for example, 53% of cybersecurity leaders reported increased phishing activity since the beginning of the pandemic, much of it targeted at workers that are working from home. Over the same period, the FBI has seen a quadrupling of complaints on its Internet Crime Center webpage. Without meaningful intervention on the human element of cyber risk, the coming remote work revolution could make things much worse. Three trends are emerging about where and how post-pandemic work is going to be happening, and each really will be altering the cyber risk landscape forever. First, a vastly larger population of remote workers will permanently expand the attack surface. This is a phenomenon that's going to require new ways of prioritizing and ultimately mitigating cyber risk. Second, companies will be turning to the human element of cyber risk, and they will be building more robust cyber risk cultures in response to ensure resilience from cyber and other disasters. And third, HR leaders, human resources, will emerge as essential cybersecurity players, and they will be called upon to join forces with their Chief Information Security Officer and other technical colleagues. Companies that fail to embrace this changing reality will be facing increasing exposures against cyber attack. Injured parties, counsel, and courts will come to recognize that human-caused cyber incidents in many cases are avoidable and typically negligent. And insurance underwriters will be similarly unsparing when assessing clients for cybersecurity insurance underwriting purposes. So the bottom line really is that to protect themselves, companies should start now with building and funding the people-focused cyber risk management strategies that they're going to need to avoid major financial, legal, and reputational loss. Before the pandemic, experts estimated that about 3.6% of American employees were working full-time from home. That's about 2 to 3 days per week as defined by the US Census Bureau. And that number represents a total of about 5 million people. And as the country comes out of COVID-19, those same experts estimate that the percentage is going to skyrocket to as much as 30% by the end of 2021. That's a 733% increase. About 42 million people, about a third of the American workforce, who will be working full-time from home all the time. And the massiveness of this sea change cannot be overstated. It took 15 years, from 2005 to 2020, for the number of full-time work-from-home employees to expand from about 3.5 million people to 5 million people. That's about a growth rate of 2.86% year over year. By contrast, COVID-19 will explode the current number more than eightfold, a growth rate of about 493% in just about 18 months. In short, the pandemic will accelerate what had been a gradual and growing shift toward remote work into a high-stakes speed race. According to Willis Towers Watson's latest cyber claims data filed against cyber insurance policies, 63% of cyber incidents are caused by employees, typically through accidental disclosure, social engineering scams, ransomware, and even, unfortunately, malicious intentional behavior. The lack of direct physical oversight over remote employees only compounds these problems. Without effective cyber risk controls to address the human element, companies are at serious risk of crashing and burning as their work-from-home populations rapidly expand. And to avoid this fate, they really must engage their remote teams and develop strategies that ultimately change cybersecurity attitudes and behaviors for the better. Their futures literally depend on it. I should note that employee enthusiasm for remote work had been very high even prior to COVID-19. In a 2019 survey, 99% of employees responded that they'd like to work remotely, at least part of the time, for the remainder of their careers. And they cited eliminated commutes, greater work schedule flexibility, increased personal and family time, as well as better work-life balance as really key to their positions. Among employees that already were working from home, about 80% reported reduced stress levels and improved overall health. Remote work also was saving employees a lot of money, ranging from $2,000 to $7,000 a year on average in areas such as commuting, clothing, food, and childcare expenses. On the flip side, employers welcomed the 13% increased productivity common among remote workers as compared to their in-office counterparts. Employers likewise appreciated the improved morale, increased employee loyalty, and higher retention rates that were fostered from work-from-home arrangements. They also cited as a major benefit the considerable cost savings resulting from diminished need for physical office space. The pandemic is going to put these existing trends on steroids, and 5 factors will drive the rapid change that we're about to see across the economy. First, demand for work from home is going to increase among employees. Many of them, although they've been experiencing these arrangements in less than ideal circumstances, really have a better idea of the potential, what could be. Second, managers traditionally were fearful about people working from home. They were concerned about impaired collaboration and lower productivity among remote workers. Having undergone lockdown themselves, however, they increasingly will trust those workers and then provide them with the virtual tools that they need to get the job done. Third, shareholders are not going to forget anytime soon the pandemic caused business interruptions that really existed across every industry sector. They're going to press companies to continue work from home arrangements in many cases in order to be ready for the next disaster situation that may befall us. Fourth, employers now have overwhelming evidence of how inefficiently they've used office space in the past. They'll undoubtedly seek to maximize cost savings by perhaps reducing their office footprint space. And fifth, and not in every industry, but many executives are going to take a hard look at travel expenses. And I have a strong suspicion that face-to-face meetings will be fewer, and they will really be gauged by whether or not ROI justifies them happening. So virtual meetings, in many cases, will become a default. So While there are many benefits that I think can come from the unfortunate COVID-19 pandemic in terms of how we're doing work and how efficiently, there are unfortunately some negatives that are coming very quickly over the horizon, specifically a rash of very new and significant cyber risk management challenges. So when asked by a reporter why he robbed banks, the early 20th century gunslinger Willie Sutton was reported to have said, because that's where the money is. And today is really no different. Companies across every industry sector hold vast amounts of financial and personal data, as well as intellectual property, that are a modern day Willie Sutton's dream. Unlike old Willie, however, this century's cyber criminals aren't menacingly brandishing weapons to terrorize their victims. Instead, their easiest way to a company's treasure is through its employees. And in the last several months, hackers have preyed upon the public's palpable concern about COVID-19 in order to spread malware and to launch cyber threat campaigns. They've deployed an onslaught of emails that purport to advertise coronavirus protection and detection techniques, but which actually deploy ransomware when opened. Cybercriminals have ramped up efforts against remote workers especially. They know that many people are working from home for the first time, often with less than secure computer networks, even less secure hardware, and very often inadequate IT support. They also know that remote work comes with a slew of family, household, and other distractions that contribute to higher email click rates and, by extension, higher rates of cyber infection. The hundreds of millions of new remote workers that make up this expanded attack surface represent a very tempting target for the cyber criminals that are out there. As one leading cybersecurity services provider provided this past summer, quote, "The COVID-19 pandemic has created a perfect storm for scammers and hackers." Now, cybersecurity technologies undoubtedly will be evolving to help address these new challenges, and rightly so. You need to have security technology as part of any comprehensive cyber risk management program. The problem is that these technologies often fall short of addressing the human element of the risk, and this is really critical. To get ahead of the problem, companies must find ways to more meaningfully engage their remote workers and really to build a risk culture that increases engagement with those workers. It's really going to be the only way that we can stop the current cyber criminal momentum in its tracks. As Willis Towers Watson insurance claims data shows, effective cyber risk prevention and mitigation is largely a people problem. So in response, companies need to analyze and assess the elements of their cultures that expose them to heightened cyber risk. And to that end, Willis Towers Watson researchers are very well versed in all aspects of employee experience. Each year, they conduct about 700 surveys of companies located globally, comprising of about 7 million people. And after exhaustive study and analysis, they've identified 4 cultural indicators of higher than average cyber risk. The first is lack of customer focus. So employees in breached companies report less emphasis on the customer, slower responsiveness to the customer, and fewer proactive efforts to gather and collect customer feedback. The second area is poor adaptability. Again, employees in breached companies report that their companies lack both speed and flexibility when it comes to decision making and managing teams. Third, low empowerment. Employees in breached companies report lower favorable scores when it comes to empowering staff through communication, respect, and support for teamwork. And fourth is inadequate training and compensation. Again, employees in breached companies report less adequate training for the work that they do, specifically less opportunity to upskill and to advance in their roles, and a need to better align pay with performance. With the permanent workforce population working from home skyrocketing to about a rate of about 733% by the end of next year, companies should start examining their existing human capital investments now so they can get ahead of these cultural shortcomings. Their cyber survival is really going to depend upon a new model of addressing cyber risk. So in order to advance more robust cyber risk cultures, remote team managers should adopt strategies with their customers that embed what I call empathy for all. That means putting employees first through genuine and active caring for their well-being. What we found that once employees feel cared for, they extend that care to their clients as part of their day-to-day interactions. So as a starting point, managers should outline a vision for their remote teams that clarifies that remote workers are not anonymous cogs in some machine, but in fact are part of a collaborative team that serves real people and real companies that are facing tough challenges. And to support that vision, remote team managers should be scheduling regular team calls. They should be used in part to nurture awareness and discussion about their company, encourage the sharing of both professional and personal information, and of course to recognize team members who are doing a particularly good job. Managers also should be hosting virtual happy hours, lunches, and other get-togethers to promote team trust and collaboration. At the same time, they should be maintaining direct lines of communication with individual employees. And by initiating those periodic check-in calls on a one-on-one basis, managers really can help foster that human connection while also ensuring that everybody's voice is heard. Now, by modeling these kinds of empathetic behaviors, managers really can serve as proactive models for their teams that encourage their team members to mimic that behavior. So what does that mean? Well, for example, if you're a manager who is engaged in deep listening to your employees, your team members, that could inspire a remote worker to schedule a virtual coffee hour with a client or a prospect just to discuss, some of the business challenges that they're facing. And that kind of interaction, especially in this COVID-19 world, can really lay the foundation for a future business relationship. I should emphasize, though, that empathetic engagement doesn't just happen. To enable it, managers need to make sure that technology is in place for seamless communications, both internally with the team and externally with clients and prospects. This can absolutely be a struggle. I use my own company as an example. We're still having an internal debate as to whether or not Skype, Microsoft Teams, or Zoom is the best way to go. But the broader point that effective communications that work seamlessly need to be in place has not been lost on anybody, nor has the fact that being able to engage people this way has a positive impact on cybersecurity. As a further step to advance more robust cyber risk cultures, remote team managers should enhance adaptability by focusing their teams on successful outcomes. So not compliance with one-size-fits-all processes and workflows. To make this happen, managers should adopt policies that let remote workers decide how they're going to structure and schedule their own daily work. And obviously, while managers should have the final word on end products, this practice really does put employees into the driver's seat when it comes to innovating on behalf of changing requirements that customers may have. And it also provides them with the flexibility they need to strike a more healthy work-life balance. And to further promote autonomy and adaptability, managers should empower remote workers to automatically do the right thing and follow their gut with clients. So that means empowering them to take action without having to go through sort of extensive approval processes or rigid adherence to procedures that might have been working in an in-office environment. This freedom really does make employees heroes to their clients and transforms them from being order takers to decision makers. And with more skin in the game, what we're finding in the research is that employees tend to work harder, faster, and at a higher level of quality for their clients. It also makes them more likely that they're going to be minding their cybersecurity P's and Q's. And finally, communications in adaptive work environments really cannot be a top-down affair. The old practice of telling employees, don't come to me with a problem unless you have a solution is really on its way out. Managers instead should be regularly soliciting feedback from their offsite teams in order to detect pain points early on, and then they should be more in a collaborative posture to start working through those issues. In other words, managers should be sort of on a constant hunt for issues that they might otherwise see, if they were working with these employees in an in-office environment, so they can get ahead of them before they become a real issue. And then they have to actually roll up their sleeves and help. The third issue, and again, as a further way to embolden and fortify an effective risk culture, is to help and encourage employees in the area of employee voice. That means encouraging employees to proactively share their concerns, ideas, and suggestions for improving business and the delivery of their services. Managers can and should mine this information, especially for insight into customer needs, using it really as a kind of smoke alarm to sort of detect and assess client sentiment and course correct in order to avoid a potential business opportunity. And the science is clear. Managers who are actively encouraging their workers to come forward with their views create happier teams, promote more collegiate environments, and in the end, boost productivity. So to get started, employee voice strategies should include formal mechanisms through which employees can share their input, and managers should really make it safe for them to do so by explaining to them very clearly how received information will be shared up the chain. One way of doing this is anonymized staff surveys, especially ones that are conducted by outside third parties. They're particularly effective because people will tend to be much more open in an anonymized setting. And to boost participation, managers really need to collaborate with those outside vendors with a communication strategy, a pre-communication strategy, explaining why their opinions are being solicited, how that information will be used, and how anonymized it will be. The surveys really could be distributed in multiple formats. We're all remote these days, so being able to distribute them not only on laptops, but also cell phones, tablets, and other media really increases the response rate. I would note that surveys are really only one way to contribute to this empowerment phenomenon. Once workers provide their advice, it's equally critical that managers take concrete action or explain why action is not being taken, so management efforts are not dismissed as sort of some tokenism happening. Workers want to know, if you've engaged them effectively and they're offering their perspectives, that those perspectives are actually going to be used and implemented in a way that makes things better for the environment, and that they ultimately will be included again in future decision making. Otherwise, what's the point of surveying your population? And once leaders have actually decided how to proceed based on employee input, which they should share back with the employees, they should also have some smaller surveys, what I call pulse surveys, to find out how implementation of new ideas is going and to course correct as needed. And that way they can solicit additional input if they need it. So what does this all get you? Well, first and foremost, the repeated process of asking, receiving, and acting on feedback does create an ongoing sense of employee engagement. If employees understand that their viewpoints are being taken seriously and they do see real changes happening, they're going to continue developing, refining, and offering their ideas. And their frontline insights can significantly enhance both corporate decision-making and organizational efficiency. This virtuous cycle of improvement can be strengthened, moreover, with additional mechanisms that empower employee voice. Mechanisms like mobile phone apps that facilitate chat functionality, group networking, feedback, and two-way dialogue, that sort of thing. Another good idea is having standing virtual forums. This is something that I'm aware of some of my clients doing, where employees meet fairly regularly to describe their needs, client needs, business operations, and career track and other career-related issues. Another option, and I've seen one client in particular do this, if an issue comes up, it's sort of a hot burning issue, what they call it is a virtual jam, where they bring in different people from different disciplines, they highlight what the issue is, and everyone works together, usually in a short burst of time, to come up with some decision options for leadership to choose from. So again, that engagement is quite empowering. And then obviously we can do the old approach of sending an email, setting up an email mailbox for people to send suggestions in as well. Is your organization doing some of these things already? If they are, that's great. The point now is also to understand the cybersecurity benefit of all this. At the end of the day, an engaged and respected workforce is a more cyber secure workforce. And there's nothing that there's not to love about that. It's a wonderful thing. And also, in order to advance more robust cyber risk cultures, again, addressing these engagement issues, remote team managers really need to adopt training and compensation strategies that maximize employee engagement. Employee training, and the term of art that many of my colleagues use is upskilling, really is a win-win that helps managers mold their workers to better meet the needs of the business, changing customer needs, and their own career objectives. Upskilling really enhances retention and competitiveness, and it makes an organization very attractive to new hires. And again, as the data shows, it also promotes greater cybersecurity in the day-to-day interactions of employees. Before building a formal upskilling, however, managers need a clear understanding of the foundational knowledge that they want all of their employees to have. What do they want them to know, and over what time frames? And that understanding only can be gained through regular conversation with remote team members about their individual training requirements, the company's business goals and objectives, and ultimately how to best align both for the benefit of all. And moreover, in order to make this sort of training really stick, managers really should be encouraging the use of real-life role-playing simulations that enable employees to apply new knowledge that they've gained almost immediately. I would add that less formal upskilling opportunities are equally, if not more important for remote workers. So-called micro-training is particularly well suited given its accessible format of bite-sized education modules that are shared through short videos. Each module is designed to address a narrow learning objective that's important to the business. And managers that are providing this micro-training should periodically query their teams about what additional topics would be useful to the successful accomplishment of their day-to-day work, and then to build programs around these interest areas. And by migrating, chosen modules to a cloud-based learning environment, managers get the added benefit of being able to track the courses that each worker is taking, the time to completion, tests taken, and certificates earned. So it's a signal to the workforce that you are prioritizing this and engaging them at this level. Other organic upskilling options include pairing remote team members with other senior colleagues through mentorships and similar job shadowing opportunities, leveraging star talent to create mission-relevant training, and then making that training available through video meetings, recorded sessions, and webinars, encouraging the development of remote worker-led education initiatives that can foster cross-pollination throughout the organization. I know in my company, there's some extra time on our hands from time to time. And so being able to educate one part of the business about another, it has often been very effective to promoting cohesiveness. And then also for upskilling, creating internal and external learning communities where employees can freely engage, ask questions, and informally exchange information with peers. And while options are many, it's important to remember that remote workers have limits on their time as well. So managers really need to make this upskilling a priority. They can do so by allotting paid training time, rewarding employees who upskill, and then approving workshop attendance during working hours. And then knowing while you're investing in your people, you're actually getting as a major byproduct better cybersecurity attitudes and behaviors that are keeping your organization safe. Now, when it comes to the related issue of pay for performance, work from home arrangements really do create some unique challenges. As an initial matter, remote workers should not be penalized inadvertently for their status. And what that means is that companies in the post-COVID-19 world should review their existing employee evaluation and promotion criteria to ensure that they don't favor in-office employees. So for obvious reasons, traditional metrics like hours worked and face time are really not relevant to the remote environment. So managers, again, should adopt outcomes-focused evaluations that assess the quality and quantity of work that's being performed. And to make the shift, managers should collaborate with their teams to define boundaries. And what I mean by that is clear sets of objectives, tasks, and deadlines for particular kinds of work, and then free up employees to decide how they're ultimately going to navigate within those boundaries. And over time, managers can test those boundary metrics by assigning similar projects to multiple members of the team. And in that way, they can compare and contrast performance of remote workers and determine what constitutes high quality work as opposed to mediocre work. And this insight then could be used to inform benefits, salary and other promotion decisions. Experts are warning us, though, that managers should not base remote worker performance evaluations on outcomes alone. They also should be focusing squarely on behaviors. A work from home team member may be extraordinarily productive, but they should not be breaking company rules or tearing down colleagues that quote unquote stand in their way. Behavior-focused performance measures accordingly could include a person's level of cooperation on the team, supportiveness, conflict handling, mental stability, and other similar benchmarks. And given the physical distance that separates managers and the remote teams, experts further recommend that feedback be obtained from a particular employee's teammates in order to get a truer sense of their performance. And managers can make it easy for these colleagues by limiting the questions they might ask to basically stop and think of an employee and say, what should this particular employee start, stop, or continue in order to advance our business goals. Other experts suggest that managers widen that circle, getting 360-degree feedback from managers of other departments and leaders beyond the immediate team. Those folks might have a broader, more strategic understanding that can be further used to make sure that an employee's skill sets are being aligned in a way that benefit the organization as a whole. And as I mentioned previously, the side benefit of a robust pay-for-performance regime is a more robust cyber risk culture, one where more engaged employees are more consistently doing the right cyber thing. So what does all this mean practically to organizations that now have and will continue to have a large percentage of their workers working from home? There's one major takeaway that I'd like to leave you with. The criticality of these 4 aspects of employee experience: customer focus, adaptability, employee voice, and training and pay for performance, really make clear that cybersecurity cannot remain the exclusive domain of CISOs and other technical professionals. People are not what CISOs do. On the contrary, HR leaders are the experts in all things workplace culture, and they absolutely must join the fight for cyber survival. And I'll be honest, when I tell HR leaders that they are cybersecurity leaders as well, they sometimes run from the room so quickly they leave burn marks in the carpeting. In their minds, they have many other things to do, and what I tell them is, don't miss my point. I'm not asking you as an HR leader to become a guru or some sort of technical expert in all things cybersecurity. Instead, I ask them to think about what they're already doing and look at it from a new perspective. And fortunately, there's now a growing financial incentive for them to do so. In 2018, we did a big study with The Economist publication in the UK to take a deeper look at the topic of cyber resilience. And we asked questions about how are you preparing to respond and recover quickly after a cyber event. We had responses from 450 executives worldwide from every continent. And what they told us was pretty consistent and unsurprising at first glance. 73% of them plan to increase cybersecurity spending over the next several years. 50% plan to spend up to 10% more of their budgets on cybersecurity, while 23% plan to spend 11% or more. So the question became, well, why should HR leaders care about this? And the simple answer is because they're going to become the major beneficiaries of this increased funding. Survey respondents indicated to us that they plan to spend at least 50% of the increased funding on the human element alone. So 19% of the increased spending will be for hiring IT professionals and getting them the cybersecurity training and skills development that they need to protect their organizations. 16% of the increase is going to be going to rewards and incentives that are designed to encourage employees to practice good cyber hygiene. And 15% of the increase is going to be for cybersecurity training for all employees, but not just any training. Training that's really tailored to the particular role or function that they're in. So all of these areas fall squarely into an HR leader's wheelhouse. Now, the survey further revealed that companies are already spending about 1.7% of their annual revenue on cybersecurity. So with the anticipated upward trajectory on cybersecurity spending, that means a lot of new funding is going to be headed into the risk culture direction. And to get ready, HR leaders should be determining now how those incoming resources can be best spent, again, on building an effective risk culture where employees are behaving in ways that minimize vulnerability to their organizations. And for help, they really should go talk to their CISO colleagues. Together, they can build a common strategy. They need to break down the silos that may exist between them and understand how they're really fighting the same fight, just from different angles. So in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, work from home arrangements are going to become the norm for a vast number of people around the globe. And as cybercriminals shift their tactics to adjust to this new reality, the need to better manage the human element of cyber risk is going to be coming to the fore like never before. Companies will need to build more effective cyber risk cultures that focus especially on these 4 aspects of the employee experience. And those that do so will differentiate themselves substantially when it comes to lawsuits. They won't be seen as negligent if they're really engaging appropriately with employees, and even insurance. This will be an increasing differentiator. If you can show a robust culture, I think the underwriting community will have much more confidence that this is a safer organization. So I will say that remote work is our future globally, and managing the people piece of cyber risk must be too. So I appreciate very much your taking the time to listen today, and I'd be delighted to answer any questions you might have.
Tom, it seems as if we may have lost Tony, who is going to address the questions that are available. I have a couple of questions while we try to get Tony on board. You had mentioned that we're likely to see a diminution in travel as firms reassess the importance of traveling. My experience abroad is that oftentimes it is exactly the human contact that makes a difference in closing a contract. I've been told by many friends in foreign countries that one of the problems that they have with dealing with American businesses is that they have Americans come with no understanding of their country and seem to be very, let's say, upfront immediately with the details of the supposed deal. They also note that when Americans come and express some interest and knowledge of their country and engage in sort of appropriate human interaction before they get to dealing with the contract, that they're much more successful. I wonder if there's any indications that you've seen that this reduction in travel may actually adversely affect American businesses abroad.
And I can only speak anecdotally, but I think the answer is to some degree yes. There has been, I think, not only at Willis Towers Watson, but among some of the clients that I engage with pretty regularly, this feeling of, wow, we can do this online, and this isn't so bad. I can see your picture and we're having a conversation. But I would say from March until really through August, you could sense almost a certain excitement that, hey, we're going to have some cost savings here because we're getting so much done remotely. I will say though that I noticed a particular shift as people are starting to and as thankfully as COVID is starting to diminish in many areas of the world, and people are realizing that maybe being in their home all day, every day is not the most advantageous way to build a relationship, there have been more and more queries about, well, when does travel begin? And frankly, when does international travel begin? I do think that to be successful in business and what the kinds of work that I do, cybersecurity and all its aspects, you have to build relationships. I personally find it very difficult to do that looking over a computer screen. Where I think it may go when I talk to my colleagues that are sort of the experts in human capital is that there may be an increase in video chats, in like maybe some preliminary discussions, follow-up discussions, but that there will be more attention paid to, well, how do we strategically arrange for the in-person meeting and make sure that it's coupled not just with one meeting, but maybe if you're going to be in a country in the EU, for example, maybe you shouldn't be there just for 3 days, maybe you should be there for 3 weeks and maximize that time on the ground, to your point exactly, to get to know people and the culture in a way that I think is more respectful and lays the groundwork for more meaningful long-term relationships. I take your point completely. American business, people just want to get down to business right away. What I have seen is I have personally, and my team has been, generally more successful just listening and understanding what people are going through with COVID. And sometimes we don't even get into the business discussion until the second call. And that's okay. And I think that's sort of a check on sort of the American culture that's healthy, because I would much rather build a relationship that is lasting than just have it be a transactional conversation. But it remains to be seen. I do think you'll start to see more dialogue about, all right, how do we be more strategic about international travel in a way that enables us to be more successful?
Thank you very much, Tom, for that answer. That's very interesting. And I see Tony's back on. So Tony, you've got it.
Yes, good morning. Somehow we had a glitch. Good morning, Mr. Finan. It's
Good morning.
Security Awareness Month in October.
Yes.
And the ACIR's first of a two-part series in October. So we appreciate your kicking it off.
You're welcome.
We do have some questions lined up for you in addition to the one you just answered. And here is an additional question. That can happen online. Please comment.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the full question. Could you repeat?
Yes. Sometimes the real business happens in the hallways and on breaks. That can happen online. Do you have an answer for that?
I totally agree. And I think it's in those moments of more informality where, again, business relationships build and grow, and it's personal. You get to know people. One of the things that I've seen companies doing, because the reality is so many organizations are not allowing travel to happen, is, and it's something I spoke to, where if you're having, and something I actually am doing increasingly, even with my internal colleagues and with clients and prospects, having sort of a no strings attached conversation. Like, hey, let's just talk about, how are you dealing with COVID? How are you handling your children being in school if they have to learn remotely? Do you have any ideas for me? And I think it's that human connection piece. It's harder to do, again, over a computer screen, but if it's genuine, and when you're at home, just having a conversation, which would be normally happening in that break room, and have it not be about business, but about how are you doing? How are you adjusting to, having to go grocery shopping wearing a face mask all the time? Or how do you even socialize? Or have you had a family member that you haven't been able to see, a senior family member? I'm seeing my colleagues doing that more. I've been doing it more. And it very often is not followed by a, let me tell you about this cybersecurity solution we have. And I think it's very humanizing. So I don't know when people are going to be cleared to go back into the office. Some of the estimates that I hear from my own company is that it won't be probably before the winter of next year. Not knowing where the vaccines are and where we are in that progress. But I do think human beings are immensely adaptable. And if they can use video teleconferencing to have a sincere exchange of ideas that, again, is a no strings attached conversation and is genuine, I think you can at least sow the seeds for a future business relationship, but without being cynical, sowing the seeds for a future relationship period, which is, I think, something we all need in this COVID environment. I think it's very important that we be human to one another, and to the extent technology can support that, I think that's very powerful.
Yes, Tom, in that few moments while I was technically cut off, I'm not sure that you were asked the question about the percentage of cyber criminals that were caught. Was that question thrown at you?
It was not, and it's an important one.
If not, please forgive me. Allow me to ask you the entire question unto its own.
Sure.
And also, please be aware that we are running down short of time, sad to say. So if you can kind of micro encapsulate, we'd appreciate it.
Sure.
The question that was asked is, what percentage of cyber criminals are caught, and how likely are they to be meaningfully punished, especially if overseas?
So
There's a backup question. Are there examples of new insurance products to address this?
yes. So the quick answer is the percentage is unknowable. There are thousands, if not tens of thousands, of cyber criminal threat actors around the globe. Some are nation states, some are criminals, some are hackers. I will tell you that in the United States, and I know in Western Europe, there is a new and heavy emphasis on criminal prosecution of these individuals. It is happening. I think that they are being very strategic in selecting those prosecutions and are publicizing them intentionally as a deterrent to this behavior. But what they want cyber criminals to know is that eventually we will find you. So that is happening. And I think you're going to be seeing that increasingly over the next 3 to 5 years. In terms of cyber insurance, it's a great question. It makes a company whole for the loss of data. So if data is stolen, or if you have to clean up after a cyber event, or your business shuts down and you lose income, that is going to be covered by a cyber insurance policy, whether it's a cyber criminal or any other threat actor. There is a distinction, though, that if someone comes into your system and steals money, like it's a financial crime, that's not so much cyber insurance. It's actually a commercial crime policy. So very often you're seeing a cyber insurance policy working in tandem with a commercial crime policy.
I am so sad. I'm sorry we have run out of time. You gave us such a complete and comprehensive address on the issue. And unfortunately, I have 8 or 9 questions to ask you out of this, in addition to the ones that were just thrown at you. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, and I have to turn the program back to Dr. Kennedy. Mr. Finan, it's been a pleasure. I hope we can have you back sometime to re-examine what is now what you call reshoring. Dr. Kennedy, he's all yours. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom. It's certainly been great to hear your very thoroughly put and insightful comments. We certainly now have a much better understanding of the potential short, medium, and long-term impact of COVID-19, both the positive aspects of that and the negative aspects of that, where we're going to see probably a very sizable increase in as compared to over the past, of employees who continue to work at home for all the particularly the positive reasons that both the employees and the companies seem to feel. I do get very concerned about how creativity in the future may be affected. I am also concerned about whether this concept of productivity increase is a long or short-term prospect. I could also see a future where over time productivity begins to decrease for all the human aspects that we see within the workplace. At any rate, I do thank you for those very thorough comments. I'd also like to thank all those of you who have joined us today and emphasize the importance of staying safe and healthy during these particularly trying times. Please do follow the guidelines of physical distancing and wear your masks as appropriate. And please get your flu shot. Again, thanks to all of you for joining us. We wish you health and great happiness in the future. From Atlanta and ACIR, good afternoon.